us today, we do have State Senator Robin Webb of the 18th Senatorial District, representing Greenup, Lewis, Carter, and Boyd counties in northeastern Kentucky. Representative Cherlynn Stevenson from the 88th House District, representing part of Fayette and Scott County in the Bluegrass. Miss Allison Wiseman, President of the Kentucky High School Democrats, and our brand new Executive Director of the Kentucky Democratic Party, Miss Morgan Eaves. It is no question that women have played an enormous role in the political history of Kentucky, from Gloria Davis Powers championing civil rights in Louisville to Martha Lane Collins being elected one of the first female governors in the country. The impact that women and girls have had across our Commonwealth cannot be ignored, denied, or overlooked. Unfortunately, it's no secret that Kentucky politics is still largely dominated by men. Over 70% of our state legislature is men. And we see that in 2024, progress to that front has not been made to the way that many of us would like to see. Now, while our organization missed Women's History Month due to the rechartering and establishing of the high school Democrats, we did want to commemorate it by celebrating, albeit a little late, and shining a spotlight on some women that have left their mark across Kentucky and are still doing so today. So before we get into specific questions, I would just like to ask the guests, beginning with Senator Webb, what drew them into politics and how important they feel it is for women to become more involved in Kentucky politics moving forward. Senator?
I guess I was born into it. I came from a fairly political family. My mother was active Democrat, chaired many campaigns regionally in the county, was on the state committee, was a delegate to a convention. And then my father, in his party, he was a Republican. So he chartered most of the young Republican clubs in East Kentucky and went on to be a delegate in his party. But he had friends across the aisle, and certainly I grew up that way with the house divided. So I had no choice, and I had friends that were governors, Republican governors, Democrat governors. And then I went on to work for the House majority back then in the House leadership when I was in law school. So I worked in my first campaign for Senator Nelson Allen, my predecessor, when I was in like the third grade. And it's just something that I've always been around.
Coming from a political family myself, I know that that's not an excuse. It's a very valid reason.
It's a genetic defect, maybe. I don't know.
It can be a blessing and a curse, I know. It can be a blessing and a curse. Representative Stevenson, I know your story pretty well, but not everybody else on here does. So if you'd like to share your story on becoming involved in Kentucky politics.
Yeah, well, I did not grow up necessarily in politics, although my parents are what we would call yellow dog Democrats and, politically active growing up, but neither of my parents ever held office. I'll say it that way. Really, I never thought about running for office myself. I was kind of looking for a candidate to support. After Donald Trump became president, I was really motivated to find somebody. The very first candidate that I ever canvassed for was Allison Grimes in her bid to unseat Mitch McConnell. So, I got a little taste of it and really wanted to help somebody and just try to make a difference after Donald Trump's election in 2016. And lo and behold, I ended up becoming the candidate myself. There was a lot of turmoil in Kentucky around pensions for teachers and state employees. My mom was a teacher. A lot of cousins and aunts are teachers. A lot of my friends are teachers. Public education is a field dominated by females. And so while it was an attack on them and their profession, it felt like an attack on women as well. So a friend called me up and said, "Hey, have you ever thought about running for office?" And I said, "Oh my gosh, are you smoking crack?" And the rest is history.
Thank you, Ms. Stevenson. Ms. Wiseman, would you like to share your story?
Yeah, so in 2016, that was the first time I was legally old enough to vote. And so I had voted for Hillary Clinton and felt really confident about it. And when she had lost, felt really devastated and really depressed. I was a sophomore in college and I went to Hanover College in Indiana, where we had a really strong international student population, and watching my, classmates fear for their lives because they honest to God thought they were going to get deported and not be able to finish their education really struck a nerve for me. And so after that, I really started to get involved. In the summer of 2018, I interned for Kentucky Youth Advocates, and part of my internship that summer was to follow Governor Bevin's 1115 medical waiver that he was pushing through, which really impacted Medicare and Medicaid coverage for dental and vision screenings. And to be a kindergartner, you have to have a dental and vision screening. And so that was something that I covered and really did not like a lot. And so that's when I started realizing I wasn't a Republican by all means in Kentucky. And then my mom's a public school teacher for JCPS. And as Representative Stevenson mentioned, the attack on public ed that really impacted my mom directly. And watching then Attorney General Andy Beshear attacking that head on in the court system really hit home for me and really was close to my heart and my family's. And so from then I interned on his campaign in 2019 for governor. And then in 2020, when I went to DC for grad school, I interned for Congressman Yarmouth up there in his DC office before COVID hit, and then came home and got really involved with local Young Dem politics, such as Louisville Young Democrats, which then fed into Kentucky Young Democrats, as well as working on Charles Booker's campaign in 22 and Amy McGrath's in 2020. And so now being president of Kentucky Young Dems, I've become really, really passionate about making sure young voices are brought to the table, such as yours and others here. And everyone on this call, I think, can agree that I'm probably the loudest advocate for a young person to be involved and in a space that I believe that they should be in. And so because of all of that, that's why I kind of got involved. That's like the really shortened version of why I got involved.
Well, if you're looking for young voices, this is certainly the place to find them. Last but certainly not least, Ms. Eaves.
Hi, yes. My reason for getting involved in Kentucky politics stemmed from my reason for getting involved in politics generally. In 2008, I was attending college at the University of Mississippi, which was has a really long history in the civil rights movement, not all good. And it was the place where the first debate between then Senator Barack Obama and Senator John McCain was held, the first presidential debate. And for an entire week before, the KKK protested on campus. And it really just made me mad. And I saw that there were some students that identified with that kind of ideology. And it made me want to get involved and figure out how I could combat that and make sure people got out to vote and understood the issues. And so I got involved with President Obama's campaign. And when I moved back home after law school, moved back home to my hometown of Richmond in Madison County. And the same people that were on city commission when I was a kid were still on city commission when I was a young lawyer. And, all politics is local. And I had really good mentors there who encouraged me to get involved and started in a nonpartisan way. And then former Representative Rita Smart recruited me to run for the state house. Lost by 24 votes, but thank God Andy Beshear liked me because he pulled me into his office. And yeah, so it involved, started national and then moved back to local, and I'm happy for all of the experiences.
Absolutely. And whether it's you're born into it like Senator Webb or an issue draws you into it, I think it really is important to know why you're doing it, like what the fight is about. And so thank you all for sharing those stories. When Representative Stevenson was speaking, it struck me, she mentioned attacks on women in the state legislature. And like I mentioned, over 70% of our state legislature is male. And my next question to all of you is, how does that affect policymaking? Are there certain things that can't get done, certain things that's helpful to get done with? what are the barriers that exist when you have a state legislature that is so incredibly dominated by males? And I'd like to, I guess, begin with Miss Eaves, since she went last the first time around.
I was going to say, I think Senator Webb is probably historically the most outspoken woman in the Kentucky legislature. So this is a great question for her. You know, the impact of policies on women is really difficult to explain when the majority of people making those policies are men. So that's why it's so important to have not only more women, but if we're going to have a man, they need to at least be able to hear our side of the story. You know, Senator Chambers Armstrong worked really hard this year to get a diaper tax included in the state budget. And what did they do? Instead, they put a tax for gold and silver in the state budget. So I think that's a pretty good illustration about what's important to the majority male legislature and why it's really important to have more women, and the women that we do have, why they need to be outspoken about issues that matter to women, and try to find a way to make it, I guess, make sense to a man. Because traditionally, you know, Kentucky's a pretty old-fashioned state. Men probably aren't buying or changing a lot of diapers. So if we could just make some of those connections with how it affects working families, you know, that's where you kind of find the common ground in terms of policy making. But certainly our policymakers are going to answer that question a lot better than I did.
Well, and you meant a tax exemption.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry. I said a tax exemption. Yes.
Right. I'll pivot to Senator Webb because she just got talked up quite a bit there.
Well, I've been breaking barriers since I was in the 6th grade and was the first girl to play in the homeroom tournament basketball. And since that time, you know, I wrangle cattle, I show horses. I've been an underground coal miner and a trial lawyer in East Kentucky when I had judges tell me women shouldn't be lawyers. So, you know, I've been a non-traditionalist in a lot of ways and try to blaze some paths, if you will, and just like I always said, raise a daughter that thinks they're able to do it, and raise a son that thinks it's okay. You know, that's been my goal as a mother. And you know, what you find is just, you know, a lot of people live in a bubble. They just live in their bubble, and they haven't had exposure to some of the hardships and tribulations of, say, somebody in East Kentucky. And they don't get it. There's a big disconnect, and it's not only male, female, it's urban, rural, or whatever the case may be. But I mean, we've got some of the good guys down there. Don't get me wrong. They like strong women. They work well with women. But overall, it's just a mindset. It's just a mindset. It's a cultural mindset, and very hard to navigate. And when I was in the House, if 3 of us got together, you know, they had a name for us. It was the B Caucus. And, you know, you can imagine what that stood for. But I mean, if 3 of us got together, they'd say, oh, the B Caucus is meeting. They're up to something. I mean, you know, and in a way we scared them, but in a way they minimize us. So, you know, we're minimized overall, not only. So, yeah, I'm vocal. I represent you know, a district that knows me well enough to expect it of me, and they'd be disappointed if I wasn't. But we also have to build alliances, and you have to work within and pick your battles more when you're a woman, just like you do in corporate America, just like you do in school. I mean, you just translate it over to the legislature, and it's the same kind of thing women are facing in every civic group, at home, even, or any corporate job.
Of course, and while we would never want to villainize men, the fact is diversity is a strength. And I also come from Eastern Kentucky, and I see every day the mindset that you described in the culturally isolated area, how people live in that bubble. And oftentimes it can inhibit progress. And Representative Stevenson, if you'd like to speak a little bit more on your experience in the state legislature, on how it has presented some barriers and some really important pieces of legislation.
Well, I think it's unfortunate that there is still that old mindset, a woman has to come in and prove herself, and the men tend to be welcomed with open arms and a clap on the back and here's a bourbon. And so that makes it difficult. You come in not only as a brand new legislator, but you still have that other hoop or that other hump that you feel like you have to get over to prove yourself. And it stinks that the population of Kentucky is 50.5% women, yet we only make up 30% of the General Assembly. And every minority should be represented equally. If our General Assembly looked like the population of Kentucky actually looks, there would be just a world of difference of the legislation that you're seeing actually come out of the State House and the State Senate. It's interesting. Senator Webb talked a little bit about experiences, and it is different. I am a woman who has never had children, so therefore I don't have some of the experiences that the women that are there that are mothers do. And I think that we just need to take everyone's life experience into account when we're working with them in any aspect. But know that just because your experiences aren't the same doesn't mean that any one person is less valuable than the other, just because things are different. I will tell one small story that I did not personally experience, but one of the women who came before me loved to tell new women legislators as they came in. Back when Gardasil first came out, which was the HPV vaccine, they were discussing that in the State House a lot. And so they were talking a lot about cervical cancer. And a Republican male was sitting next to her and leaned over to her and says, "Where's my cervix?" Yeah, look at Morgan's face. But this actually happened, and it didn't happen all that long ago. I mean, we all know Gardasil came around, it's been less than 20 years ago. So we have people making decisions about women's health care when they don't even know about women's health, women's reproductive health. If a man doesn't know if he has a cervix or not, he has no business making decisions about what I do with mine or not.
Oh yeah, well, let's quit teaching that in schools, whatever. Okay.
Oh yes, exactly. So it's preposterous. It's really sad. You want to think that every single person that sits in that chamber has a wealth of knowledge about many things and is highly qualified to be making those decisions. And unfortunately, they're not. And we're seeing that with what comes out. We're seeing a lot of terrible legislation that is dog whistling and pandering to the lowest common denominator. And it's really sad.
Absolutely. And Senator Webb, we're far too impressionable to learn those things in the classroom.
I'd rather you learn them in the classroom than on the internet. That's all I'm saying. No, but Cheryl Lynn's, she's right. It's you have to have an open mind a little bit, and you have to listen. And that sometimes that's a hard commodity to find out there.
Absolutely. Ms. Wiseman, I know you're not a policymaker yourself, but if there's anything you'd like to add, you can certainly do so.
Yeah, I think as a young woman, and it's really important that it's understood that a lot of the decisions are going to impact my future and like my siblings' future, because we are young, and all these policies, a policy doesn't just happen overnight, it happens over time. And so as I grow older, my sisters grow older, all of this is going to really impact us. And for young candidates, a lot of the candidates who I help out and work for and really advocate for do eventually want to start a family one day. And whether it's a husband or if it's a wife or whatever it may be, regardless, the woman's healthcare decisions impacts their family. I work for a candidate right now who he and his wife want to start a family soon, but it's the unfortunate reality of what if they have complications? What if his wife struggles to get pregnant? She can't have access to very vital care here because we live in Kentucky. I have a friend who had to seek an abortion and travel to South Carolina to have it because she couldn't get it here. So she had to drive 9 hours to go to South Carolina, of all places, who has better laws than here. And so that's the reality that, many young women and young people in general are facing. And that's why for us as young people, it's super important that not only that we do vote and advocate for candidates who support this, but also run for office ourselves. Because like I said, all of this policy making impacts our futures way more than it does half of the legislature. I don't know the average overall age of the legislature, but a lot of it is older white men who are making these decisions that really impacts young people like us. And so if you ever feel passionate about this and want to run, we need more young people there to help create legislation that directly impacts us in 10, 15 years, not the older white men that are there right now.
And just don't run for your school board. Run for the city council.
Yeah, run for anything. You don't have to run for Frankfurt. Run for anything.
The county offices. It's a great training ground. Young Democrats was my training ground. I was a state president, national committee woman several terms, and we ruled at national conventions. But that's where I learned how to play this game and play it hard, And so, keep doing what you're doing. And the relationships that you have, too, are very important as you move forward because you'll keep those the rest of your life.
Absolutely. Thank you all. The last question that I have before I open it up to the group for further, more specific questions is one that I think Ms. Wiseman will like quite a bit. How is it that we can take steps as an organization ourselves and as a party in general to bring more young women into politics? Ms. Wiseman, if you'd like to start.
Yeah, so a big thing that we do at KYD is we have a lot of constant communication with county parties as well as state party leadership. Morgan and I have a great relationship. She and I talk pretty frequently, as well as the previous director of the state party as well, to really help make sure that young people had their voices heard and that they were involved in these processes, because a lot of times young people don't want to get involved because they don't feel like they belong. And so it's really important that you make those relationships and establish them and maintain them. Luckily, for me personally, I'm blessed enough to have a relationship with a lot of people who support young Dems, such as, the governor, the lieutenant governor, Congressman McGarvey, all over the spectrum, to really help make sure that we are being heard. But don't ever be afraid to make a connection, go to a county party meeting, go to an organizing event in your community, or just anything that that's going on. Don't be afraid to go and have those conversations, because that type of grassroots organizing is how the party as a whole, grows and strengthens our infrastructure on the ground, so that eventually we can take back some seats in Frankfurt. We can take back some seats in local government. We can take back, a congressional seat or a Senate seat federally, whatever it may be. Just don't ever be afraid to put yourself out there and attend something. And if you need help doing that, I am more than welcome to establish that relationship. I've got a lot of good relationships with county party chairs throughout this Commonwealth because that's what we do at the KYD level. So if you ever need help doing that, don't ever hesitate to reach out to myself or Morgan, because she is great at doing that as well. And I just completely threw her into that. So I hope she's cool with that.
Yes.
Well, on that note, if you'd like to go next, Miss Eaves.
Yes. Oh, you're also so sweet for calling me Miss Eaves. That's so polite. Thank you.
Eastern Kentucky hospitality. Is
No,
that right?
I love that. Thank you. I think it all starts with a conversation. You can't be afraid to have conversations, in your case, with your friends at school, with your friends in extracurriculars, because what Allison said about policy that's being passed now and impacting you all, and even, your kids and their kids, that is who is going to experience the brunt of all of the policy that's being passed now. So you all are involved and you're clearly aware and educated on the issues. Don't be afraid to have conversations with people about that, because that peer-to-peer connection is what gets people involved. We know that young women particularly really care about reproductive health, because that's a big question mark in their future about what they're able to do and how they're able to access it. So don't be afraid to have those conversations with your friends and about how it could impact them in the future. Same with LGBTQ issues. That's huge for our youth right now, male and female. And there's really only one party that's really trying to combat some of the hate that's being directed towards that community and make that connection with people. Even if it's someone that's not a member of that community, you'll know if they care or not. And don't be afraid to go out on the limb and start with that conversation. And then if you kind of gauge that they're interested in those issues, talk to them about how they can get involved in campaigns. As Allison said, you shouldn't be afraid to go to county party meetings. You shouldn't be afraid to go to anything the KDP is having. And, some of the best interactions young people can have are with local elected officials or officials at the state level. And that's really inspiring. So don't be afraid to start those conversations, make policy connections with how they impact your life and how they could impact, your kids' lives in the future. And don't be afraid to attend those events and seek out a picture with Andy Bashir or Jacqueline Coleman or Cherlynn or Robin, because that FaceTime with people is really inspiring. And that is kind of what gets people hooked and gets people involved. So don't be afraid to take any of those steps.
Absolutely. Thank you. Ms. Stevenson?
Well, I will tell you all to, know who's on your ballot, find someone who inspires you, and call them up. Almost everybody has a website, that you can email and say, hey, I would love to have coffee with this candidate, or I'm interested in volunteering. I would be more than happy to go have coffee with any of you. Obviously, if you want to knock doors, I have thousands and thousands that you can come help knock this fall. But, and really don't be afraid to say, hey, I'm really interested in this. I'm very passionate about it. It might be something I want to do one day, and I really want to learn from you. What kind of opportunities do you have to let me shadow you or spend a day with you, in your job? I would be more than happy. Sawyer has done it, to come spend a day with me, go into different meetings with me in the mornings, and then, be a page on the floor. And obviously, if you're too old to be a page on the floor, you can still sit in the gallery with me and watch. But just find ways to immerse yourself into meetings that are happening, be them legislative at all or party politics related at all. And don't be afraid to jump into a campaign. You'll learn a lot. You'll make a lot of really great friends. And, you never know. You might find yourself inspired to run for office yourself one day.
Absolutely. I did shadow Representative Stevenson a couple sessions back, and I somehow survived. And if you can shadow her for a day, you can shadow any of the 138. So you keep up with her. Senator Webb?
Well, track a bill, find you a subject matter that you're interested in, track the bill, go to the committee meeting, see the process. I'm really big on the institution and the process. We've lost some of the process through the years, and I think that's very important to get it back, to have more of a robust, stakeholder-oriented committee process that's open, that we have time to digest these bills. And, the process you see right now is not the best process. Because I've been there 25 years, and we weren't perfect back in the day, but it was more open. You had committees, you had real dialogue, you had opposition got to speak, you had 2-hour, 3-hour, 4-hour committee meetings. The budget process was more open. The confirmation process was more open. And that is important to me as an institutionalist. But, so what you're seeing now is not really the way it should work. And that's what troubles me the most about when we say come to Frankfort and see us, because you're not seeing the way government should work. But so always bear that in mind and know that there's a better way to do it. But find what you're interested in. And then, what's real here, folks, is I'm a rural legislator. I represented a Republican district in the House for 10 years. And my district trends Republican with a Trump rating out the roof. I was blessed not to have opposition last year, but you've got to work for commonality and civility in this climate, and you've got to build those alliances sometimes. And you've got to, when you have those conversations that people were talking about earlier, and I think Morgan understands this, you know, rural legislators are in a little different spot than our urban counterparts. And don't, you know, people stay mad at me sometimes for some of my positions or representing my district the way I do, but it's very real. And you're going to see more and more of this urban rural divide. And if you're going to have a party, any party, not just our party, you've got to take this into consideration, and you've got to, you know, that big tent we all used to talk about, it's got to be there. And it's not just name only, because if you're going to have a real two-party system, is what this, at least two-party system, at least what this country's based on. And again, I'm an institutionalist and I love my Constitution too, but you know, you've got to have that view, and you've got to embrace people that may not be able to think like you or vote like you to some degree, to find the commonality and the civility to keep us going here.
Absolutely. And you said find what you're interested in. And I think that speaks to what was mentioned earlier, finding what the fight is about and what you're passionate about if you are going to be involved. Those are all the questions that I had generally for the entire group. If there's anybody else that has anything for the entire group or for a speaker in particular, I welcome you to ask it. You don't have to ask me or anything. My mom might be a teacher, but I'm certainly not. So if anybody has anything they'd like to ask, just shout it out.
Don't be shy either. I know Nicholas is not shy.
No, Senator, I'm not. I try not to be. It's kind of my nature. But I did have a question for you, Senator and Representative Stevenson. You know, this is, of course, driven to be, you know, a female related conversation. And I've seen a lot of people talk about in the last 2 days, you know, if House Bill 10, which is the omnibus bill, if that going anywhere, what's kind of the, you know, your thought process on that? Because I know that's a big bill with, of course, healthcare and a lot of things for women and pregnancies and that sort of thing.
So I'll start, and then Senator Webb can finish. So we passed the omnibus bill out of the House pretty early in the session. It was a bill that several of us on both sides of the aisle worked on all interim long last year, trying to do some really great things for moms and babies. Kentucky has one of the highest rates of maternal mortality in the country. And so we're looking to change that trajectory. And in the House, the Democratic women have been filing a suite of bills for the last probably 4 or 5 years, like almost 30 bills about moms and babies. And so we took some of those ideas together to some of the Republican women legislators and said, hey, let's try to work on something together. Representative Kim Mosier led that effort. And we had a really, really great bill. Sent it over to the Senate, and in committee in the Senate, it got an addition. So there was another bill that had been moving in the House that got put onto that bill that has some things in it that aren't so great. There's some codifying language in there about fetal personhood, and we found that problematic. And so it's kind of hung up in the Senate right now. Last we've heard, I don't think it's going to be heard on the Senate floor. Obviously, if it comes back over to us, I'm hopeful that we would not concur with those changes. But you never know. But like I said, Senator Webb may have a better handle on where it stands in the Senate.
I don't have my crystal ball handy, but I mean, I really don't. I don't know. And anything can happen Friday or even Monday. Anything can happen. And no bill is ever dead to me until that sine die whistle blows. But you know, it's a shame. It's a shame. There's a lot of work on that. But yet maybe if it doesn't pass this time, it could be better suited for a short session because the work's already been done. There is a bipartisan consensus. And I would hope that rationality would prevail and that bill would move. But if not, there's certainly, hey, folks, we'll be back here in a few months. That's always, in some form. We'll be back here in January, if nothing else.
Yep.
Nicholas, is that?
Yeah, well, I
Okay.
just wanted to say something real quick. I want to thank all of y'all for being on here as panelists. I know it was kind of impromptu in many ways, but I appreciate it. I really do. As somebody who tries to be organized, I know sending Senator Webb a Facebook Messenger message on like 5:30 on a Friday was kind of odd, but I knew that was, a way to get somebody that I knew that were very vital on the issue, and it is from my area because I'm from Johnson County, to be a part of the conversation. And I always tell people this, it may seem weird, may seem off, but with me having a 9-year-old younger sister, it means a lot to have ladies of whatever age, whether from 0 to 100, that I can point to, say, hey, look, they're doing this. You may be 9 and have not a clue what any of this means, but they're very important and they're working for you. So I appreciate it.
That's sweet.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
You're welcome.
Absolutely. And I'd just like to echo that again. When you count step, half, and full siblings combined, the grand total is 6 sisters that I have. And so knowing that there are people out there that really do care about what happens with them, even though the decisions being made in Frankfurt might not directly affect me, it really does matter. And I also have a question for Senator Webb. I live in Eastern Kentucky. Cherlynn and I actually come from the same town. And it's really important to me to understand how we break that mindset that we were discussing earlier. It's especially prevalent in Eastern Kentucky, the idea that women can't be involved in politics and they don't deserve a seat at the table. How did you overcome that, and how can we help other women who might want to be involved in politics moving forward to do the same?
When I was an underground coal miner, there were guys that thought it was bad luck to have a woman near mine. I went in there and I did my job and I did it and I worked hard and I proved all that, I dispelled the myth. And you got to dispel the myth. And I mean, there's still some, I'm a Southern Baptist. There's still some of my folks that don't think women should do much of anything. But I've been on the leadership board at the Southern Baptist Foundation and doing all that too. So you have to interact. You've got to put yourself in a position and just do the job and show everybody you work hard. But what people don't understand, a lot of where we're coming from here, is a third of my people don't have internet on a good day. Right. And then they can't afford it. And my domestic violence victims can't get out of the holler. They don't have, transportation's our number one issue. People in Louisville, I had a senator look at me, somebody was talking about an outhouse. They're like, well, you've never done that. I'm like, yeah, I did that for years with my grandpa's. And they're like, you didn't do that. I said, oh yeah, that was a way of life. I could do it again. But there's a disconnect there. There really is on how our people are still, we don't have the topography of our region, the economy of our region. We just got to educate our own colleagues a lot of times, and you'll have to do the same thing in your Young Democrats or whatever you're involved in. But and I don't, I'm proud to be East Kentucky. My family came in and settled East Kentucky, and I'm really Johnson County Webb. Nick and I are probably cousins, but it's different. We are a little different, and I don't want to change. I'm proud of that. But there's just some challenges, and we've got to have candid conversations and meaningful conversations about what our needs are. And for years we provided energy to this whole state, and that drove the train for everybody. And now they seem to resent giving us some back. And I'm pretty outspoken on that too. But we have a lot of needs, and we just have to keep advocating.
Yep.
And my dog's advocating for time right now. So
I have one just like them. No worries. Does anybody else have any questions? Anybody, I mean, is welcome to ask one. I know the panelists would be happy to answer it.
I have one quick question. It's mainly for our legislatures, but Morgan and Allison, you can both talk about it too. How does it make you guys feel that for the past 3 elections, so 2023, 2022, and 2020, that less than half of female registered voters have voted?
I mean, I think it's really sad. I think if all women were to go out and vote, I think the makeup of our elected officials would look a lot different. And I think that voter apathy is something that we are really struggling with nationwide. I mean, you know, if you look nationwide at voter turnout, it tends to be low. When we have, you know, a midterm election here in Kentucky and we have 30% voter turnout, like we're like, woo, that's, you know, that's doing good. And but that's really sad. It's unfortunate because the way to make your voice be heard is at the ballot box, and I wish more people would take advantage. But seeing young people like you all in high school ready to get out there and do the work and be involved and just asking questions like this and spending time on a Zoom like this gives me hope. And, you know, we are really depending on your generation to come along and save all of us. We need you voting in mass. And so the second that you're eligible, you know, to vote, we need you to get registered. We need you to be sure that all your friends are getting registered to vote. And then we need you to become informed voters. You know, it is a privilege that not everyone has all across the world, and especially women. And we need everybody stepping up to be sure that they're taking part and doing their duty to get out and vote and take part in the process of choosing our elected officials.
And we really haven't had that privilege that long, if you think about it. And it's blows my mind how far we've come in some ways, but then again, we should be doing better. But voting is something that everybody should do. I mean, it's very important to me, but there are tactics in play from running campaigns, every tactic now, whether it's a 30-second soundbite to the misinformation is to keep people from voting. It's to turn you off the process. That's treasonous to me. I'm sorry. It is treasonous to me to try to deter someone from voting. But that's what you're seeing now with the whole culture and the whole business of campaigning, and everybody's probably a little guilty of it, but some more than others. But certainly, you know, we could do better. And I think if you implemented true campaign finance reform, put me and everybody else back on the stump in your district with a certain amount of money, cut the dark money, cut the lies, cut the disinformation, you will see people more engaged in the process. Everything right now is to disengage you from the process, and it is just going to be the detriment. It's to the detriment of this country.
Yes. Well, and you have all of these people who are convinced that their vote doesn't matter anymore. And if all of those people went and voted, the elections would turn out a lot different, because again, we're talking about the large majority of people who are registered to vote aren't voting. So who knows what government could look like at that point if people were really invested and would go vote. And let's be honest, I've been voting for a very long time, and I have only ever had to stand in line one time. It's fast.
Don't fall for the fact Kentucky's got a national model of election integrity. Don't let them say anything else about our process in Kentucky. It is a product of, once again, a bipartisan effort with people working together to make sure we do. So that rhetoric ain't going to fly here. So stand up for election process. It works here in Kentucky.
Yes.
Well, if Ms. Eaves or Ms. Wiseman don't have anything to add on that front, I won't keep our panelists on too much longer, but I just want to thank you again for joining in and taking time out of your schedules to be here, and thank you for everybody else that is joining. We are going to be uploading this video to YouTube. We had several members of our executive board and our organization at large that couldn't make it due to prior engagements and conflicts, extracurriculars, that sort of thing with the school year winding down. With your permission, of course, of the guests, we would like to upload that to YouTube so that they can go back and hear your remarks.
For sure.
No problem.
Everybody needs to hear Senator Webb's response about, you know, getting more people out to vote, getting them on the stump. I love that.
Yes, yes. it is
I'm a
good.
believer. I'm a believer.
Yes. And before we leave, I have a few stats I want to throw out at you guys. So obviously Kentucky has 0 women in Congress. Statewide elected officials, we have 28%. So are women. Members of the General Assembly, 30%. Kentucky mayors who are women, 20%. And the percentage of county judge executives who are women is 0.06%. But again, the population of Kentucky is 50.5% women. So, you know.
Oh, and we control a lot of money too, Cherlynn. I mean, you know, women control a lot of the money and will be controlling more of the money as the demographic changes a little bit.
Yes.
And that's what that segue is. If you got women running, you know, we can be our own worst enemies sometimes. And, you know, get out and I tell women's groups all the time, get out your checkbook and write a check. Get out your checkbook and write a check.
I also want to say before we leave, since Sawyer and Nicholas are both on here, I'm really proud of y'all for the Appalachian Regional Chapter that y'all are doing. I see the work that you all did, especially in the fall, to help get Governor Beshear and Lieutenant Governor Jacqueline Coleman reelected. I always brag on you all a lot because for a very, you know, sparse region, because there's so many counties and so much ground to cover, y'all did a lot, and I'm really proud of you all for that. And so keep up the good work. Y'all make me proud as the KYD president to know that we have such a strong infrastructure building in Appalachia of young people, because that region is what is going to really start determining, especially statewide elections, because young people are progressive out there, and there are progressives and Democrats in Appalachia. And so I'm really proud of y'all. So I just wanted to let you all know that since this is being recorded and being put on YouTube, I want that to go on the record.
Yay.
And one last thing from KDP. I've already talked to Parker about this, but if you can get to and from Frankfurt in the summer, we are having interns. So everybody, Parker knows how to get a hold of me. If anybody's interested, just reach out and I'm happy to chat with you guys. It's a great way to get involved. You'll be working on campaigns, helping with data, fundraising, communications, and just learning all about party politics, which is really center to, you know, how this whole machine runs and how we help elect people. So I would love to see some of your faces in Frankfurt this summer. So Parker can connect you guys with me if anybody's interested.
Well, thank you both. And Ms. Wiseman, I don't know about you, but I think that those days of walking the hollers might have paid off.
It definitely did. I'm not kidding. I brag about y'all a lot. I bragged about y'all to Morgan when we met a couple weeks ago about y'all. Like, y'all did a great work, and I'm super proud of you. I have someone who's knocked in Appalachia. It is difficult. I don't know how y'all do it. It is not an easy task, but someone has to do it, and y'all did a phenomenal job. And so I'm really proud of you. I look forward to watching y'all do it again for Senator Webb in her reelection, as well as other House candidates such as Zach Hall, who I know is running out there, who's a young Dem, unopposed, so I can talk about it in the primaries. So there's that. And of course, I'll plug in this Saturday is our KYD convention. I really hope y'all can be on that as well, because Representative Stevenson will be speaking again, as well as Morgan and quite a few others to really help continue getting more involved in the party. So hope to see you all there.
I'll add very quickly, Sawyer.
Go ahead.
I appreciate y'all yet again for coming. I thank you, Allison, for that plug. I knocked everywhere in Johnson County, even when I had no cell service to tell me where I was, even in places I never heard of. I had to ask my dad if that was anywhere he knew. He didn't know either. And so it was a great time. And as Senator Webb said, we probably all related in the blood of Loretta Lynn and that whole family in Vanlille. And that's very strong women. So I'm always proud to give them love and kudos.
Well, if there's nothing else, thank you guys again for logging on, and thank you to the guests for speaking today and taking time out of your schedules.